Okay, here we are inside of Sony Vegas, and what I'm going to do today is show you how to recreate the look and feel of a high dynamic range or a bloom effect inside of EVE Online, or rather inside of Sony Vegas, without the need to have it actually selected, so that there's not that much of a hit on your system resources, and it means that you can run anti-aliasing quite comfortably without the need to use an external program and so on and so forth. So first things first, this is the sort of thing that we're looking to create. So as you can see, we've got a Polaris frigate here, and we've got the high dynamic range switched on for that, and looks very good. But how do we get the effect inside of Sony Vegas? Well, this is what we do. As you can see, I've got two shots down here on track number 2, and one of them is of a gate camp effectively. It's a very dark system, and it's a bunch of ships out of gate, just sort of gate camping. And the next one is of a Deimos by a sun, and if we were to actually film this with bloom, then obviously we'd have some sort of bleed through and some kind of an effect on there. So what we're going to do is just add the HDR or the bloom effect to these two shots here, and it's a very simple thing to do. First thing, I just want to come back here and sort of use this as our reference shot. The first thing you want to do is get the footage. So I've used this piece of footage here, Gate Camp Dark. I'm just going to drop that down onto track number 3, and then I'm going to get this Deimos Sun and drop that down also onto track number 3. So we've got the exact same footage, just kind of doubled up on one another. And what we're going to do is go to compositing mode for the entire track, click on that and change it to screen. I'm just going to mute this channel out now. Now what we're going to do is use these two clips here, and we're going to alter these two clips and to get our sort of our bloomy effect. What you want to do is per clip, and I'll explain why per clip in a few moments, but go to Event FX, and you want to go to your Gaussian blur, add, and brightness and contrast, add, then click OK. As you can see now, this in the background here is kind of blurred out. First thing we want to do is go to Gaussian blur, and we want to change our horizontal and vertical range to 0.04. Now this is just my personal choice. You may want to alter it more or less, I don't know, but 0.4 is my sort of recommendation, or 0.04 rather. And go to brightness and contrast. Now we want to increase on this particular shot here. I'm going to increase the contrast to 0.45, I think, and then I'm going to increase my brightness to about 0.22, I think was my choice. And I'm just going to close that down. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that doesn't look very good, that doesn't look very impressive at all. Well, because we've changed the compositing mode of this track number 2 here to screen, and remember, everything above will render on top of everything below, because we're blending effectively these two layers together. Once we let this one go, look at that, that's what we get. Or the other way of looking at it would be to mute track number 3. See, that's the original footage there, and once we start adding in that and blending the two together, we get this effect, which is, I think, very close to actually high dynamic range. You can see that there. It's a nice distant shot there. And let's get closer here and have a look at some of these other things here. See, look at this. If I get in close here, I think it gets a little bit zoom there. See, if you look at that there, without it, see, that's standard. See, now we're getting this bleed through. If you look here at these edges and around here as well, you can see that it bleeds through, and the only thing that's actually generating that is this blur. So all of the lighting is effectively just being sort of blown out, and because we're combining the two together and giving it a screen composition on top of this, we get this this nice blend. Now obviously if you're not happy with the way it looks, you can just alter the contrast, maybe make that darker, and then increase the brightness as well, so you get a sort of a greater magnitude, if you like, of brightness. But for this particular shot here, I've sort of said to myself that 0.45 on the contrast and 0.22 on the brightness gives me the sort of look that I'm really trying to achieve there for HDR, that sort of bloomy effect. Now let's move forward and take a look at our Dymos here. Now once again let's mute track number 2 and let's come back a bit here. So what we're looking to do here is make this sun bleed through its light onto the Dymos here. At the moment it's effectively like a mask. It's sort of punching a hole in the background so that no light can get past this shape that's on the screen in 3D. So let's go to our Event FX, go to Gaussian Blur again, Add, and go to Brightness and Contrast, Add, click OK. As you can see, that blurs out, so let's go to our Gaussian Blur and let's drop that down again to 0.04 for the horizontal and 0.04 for the vertical, and go to our Brightness and Contrast. Let's increase this once again to say roughly 0.45. You can see that's the sort of effect that we're getting there. And let's increase the brightness to say 0.2. Let's say 0.2 for now. This is a very bright shot anyway, so we don't need to increase the brightness as much. Let's close that down. Now remember, we've got the entire track here selected for screen already. So let's unmute that, and that's what we get. And the good thing about this, I mean, look at that, it's fantastic. The good thing about this is that because we are blending the two, the top layer effectively has all of the detail and all of the sharpness, and the bottom layer has all of the blurriness and all of the light, and gives us that bleed around the shot there, as you can see. So once you combine the two together, that's the effect that we get. Now it's a very cheap way of doing it, I'll admit, but I think it's very hard to sort of say whether that was shot with high dynamic range in Eve or whether that was actually added as a post-processing effect. Obviously it does blur out slightly on the background, and if you remember back to the Polaris frigate here, the background doesn't blur out the same. The in-game high dynamic range only applies itself to the polygons. So once we look at this here, it's obviously applying all of the high dynamic range bloom to all of the background as well. So it will look like a bit of a filter, but at the same time it will give you that bit of quality, and it is a very high dynamic range effect where it is bleeding through, and instead of, like I say, being like a mask and punching a hole in the background, it is bleeding through and giving us that high dynamic range effect. So there we are. That's effectively how to do it. Like I say, we will need to adjust accordingly depending on the type of system that you're in, but these sort of settings here where it's 0.45 on the contrast and 0.22 on the brightness, and if you're in a very bright system, then obviously you want to drop that down to maybe 0.2, maybe even drop that down to sort of 0.1. Who knows? It's entirely up to you. You go too high and it blooms out and whites out the whole shot. You go too low and it darkens it, and if you go all the way, then that's the kind of effect you're going to get, and you're going to lose the detail in the background. As always, as I've always said, play with all of the settings and get the look that's right for you, and I think that's definitely more appropriate here than anything else, because really only you can decide how you want your film to look and whether it's going to give you that sort of that effect, which is really what you're looking for. So there you are. Once you're happy with everything, the way to render this out is just simply to render it as it is there. I would probably do all of your editing first, then get a sort of uncompressed AVI file perhaps and drop that into Sony Vegas, and then start adding these effects and then do another render all the way through. It's entirely up to you. You can do it when you're editing, but it'll be a little bit fiddly to do that. I'd probably suggest doing it as a second run or a second render if you're editing something that has that you're looking to get that sort of beauty shot to, that kind of high dynamic range sort of feel to it. But there you are. As always, once you're happy, I'd say you are good to go.